This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you now reside.
Thomas W. Osowski, and I live in Eastham, Massachusetts.
Okay. So, how did you end up on Cape Cod?
My parents moved back to the Cape when I was about 2 years old. My father used to be stationed in Provincetown in the Coast Guard. My mother's father was in the Coast Guard and retired, so that's how we came to be back in the Cape.
Which branch of the military did you enlist in?
I enlisted in the U.S. Navy.
What did you do in the Navy? Like, what part of it were you in?
I was a fire control technician, which doesn't mean a firefighter. I was an electronic warfare. My job was to shoot the big guns, shoot the missiles, protect the ship, save lives.
So who or what influenced you to enlist?
Growing up, I think it was family, father, grandfather. I never knew my grandfather, but I just knew the stories from my grandmother of him. So, kind of a family tradition.
How old were you when you enlisted?
I was 17 years old when I enlisted and just turned 18 when I entered boot camp.
How long was boot camp?
13 weeks.
How many ships were you on?
I was stationed on 2 separate ships, the USS Iowa, which was a battleship, and the USS Gallery, which was a Perry-class fast frigate. And then I was also stationed in Groton, Connecticut at the submarine base doing general duties.
How long were you on each ship for?
I was on the Iowa for about 2 years, a little over 2 years. I was on the Gallery for over 3 years, and then I was stationed in Connecticut for about 3 years, so about 9 years total service.
So you mentioned a difference between the USS Iowa and Gallery. What's the difference between those?
The USS Iowa was a World War II battleship, like the Massachusetts up in the Fall River. So it was big. It was 887 feet long, heavily armored, and it was state of the art for World War II. Then I moved on to a Perry-class frigate, which was about 445 feet long, about half the distance, aluminum. We joked and said it was like a beer can on the water because it rocked so much.
What was your first day of service like?
Very long. Boot camp, I got to Great Lakes, Illinois about, I think it was 9, 10 o'clock at night, and it kept going until about, I think it was about 9, 10 o'clock the following night was when we finally got to go to bed for a couple hours before we got up at 5 in the morning and started it all over again. So it was something to get used to, but once you fell into the routine of it, it's just like every other normal day.
Did you meet a lot of people there?
Yes. Yep. I had over 50 guys in my boot camp company, and then different commands. The Iowa had about 1,500 guys on the ship, and the Gallery had about 450 of us on there. And you didn't know everybody by name, but after a while, after a couple of months, you knew everybody by face or roughly where they worked or what they did, so it helped you.
Where else were you stationed?
I finished up my tour in the Navy down in Groton, Connecticut, working on this submarine base, which was kind of comical because I was a surface sailor working on a submarine base, but I was doing general duty working in a drug and alcohol rehab center.
What was your military rank?
I got out of the Navy as an E5, Petty Officer Second Class.
What's a petty officer?
Petty Officer is just a ranking system. You start out as a seaman recruit, then you become a seaman apprentice, a seaman, Petty Officer Third Class, Petty Officer Second Class, Petty Officer First Class, and then you become a chief, senior chief, or master chief.
Like, what wars were you in or, like, a part of?
I was in the Persian Gulf War, the first Persian Gulf War.
Oh. How long were you in the military for?
About 9 years exactly.
9 years?
Yeah.
Like, what was the whole experience like? Like, were there any, like, interesting stories or?
I jokingly tell people that I've been halfway around the world 3 times because I've been to the Persian Gulf 3 times. I did mainly what's considered East Coast, which is the Atlantic into the Mediterranean, Red Sea, and the just part of the Indian Ocean into the Persian Gulf. The other half of the world, we'll call it, you came out of California and did that stuff. Been to many, many places that I'll never go to again. Some places we're not allowed to go to again. Just the way the world has changed. Met many different cultures, seen the Great Pyramids, which was absolutely fascinating. And also have spent many, many months at sea seeing absolutely nothing. So it's the best of both worlds. I mean, I wasn't around for the birth of my first child, but other than that, made a lot of good friends, and some of them I still keep in contact with, and others have just gone their ways.
What's, like, your favorite place that you got to see?
Like I said, Egypt was fantastic. The pyramids, the tombs, King Tut's sarcophagus. The best place that I've ever went to, and I'd love to go back to as a vacation, was Rhodes, Greece, which is just like coming to the Cape. It's beaches, and during their season, it's all high paced, lots of people, multi-nations going in and out, and then you go there after the season, which we had done too, and it's a ghost town, but everybody was still so friendly in that.
So, did it work as, like, you were on the ocean or the sea for, like, a long period of time and you got off at some places?
Some places we did. My first ship, the Iowa, the longest we were pretty much underway was when we left Norfolk, Virginia, and commuted to Kiel, Germany, which we weren't in a rush, so it took us a little over 2 weeks to do. And then for the rest of that 6-month period, we kind of port hopped from one port to another, and then we got called to duty off the coast of Lebanon for a month. So other than that, we just kind of went from port to port, and it was great.
Was there a lot of, like, cases of seasickness or no? Because you had
Yes, I did. Everybody laughs at me about it, but for my first half of my naval career, no, I didn't get seasick. The second half, when I went on to the Perry class frigate, like I said, it was like a bobber on the water. It got thrown around quite easy. I got seasick for the first, I'm going to say 3 weeks. And then you get to the point where you're just not seasick anymore. A friend of mine, jokingly, when I reported aboard, he was the officer of the deck, and I was standing there, and a tugboat came by and started moving the ship, and I asked him, "Is this thing moving?" He just chuckled at me, and he says, "You're in for a fun time." And I remember distinctly the last time him and I were on the quarterdeck together. We had 2 new recruits come on board, and the same thing happened to them, and I just looked at Bill and laughed, and he just shook his head. And that's one of those memories that you were talking about.
Were there any, like, really bad storms when you were out at sea?
Yes. Yep. We ran into remnants of hurricanes coming out of the Mediterranean back into the Atlantic. We ran into the remnants of a hurricane, and the seas were over 30, 40 feet high, and they were just breaking over the ship as we were going through. So we had no choice but to go through it, and it took about a day, and then after that it was smooth sailing the rest of the way.
Did you, like, sail as a kid, or, like, were you introduced to boats young?
Always around the water when I was growing up. My parents used to think I was a fish because in the summertime I'd always be at the beach swimming. Um, Started out working in a boat rental when I was about 10 years old or so, and worked in that until about my senior year of high school, and then I tried something different and then enlisted in the Navy. And so, yeah, always been around boats or the water.
Why did you switch from the USS Iowa to the gallery?
You had a certain time that you were required to be on the ship, and then after that you could apply for another station or come to a shore duty or go to a school, and that's what my time was up for the ship, and I was actually going to school. So I went to school in Dam Neck, Virginia for about 10, 11 months, and then after that I reported to the gallery.
How different, like, people-wise or, like, atmosphere-wise was the gallery from the Iowa?
The size, it being smaller, you definitely knew everybody. And I had friends that were in engineering, I had friends in supply, I had friends, all of them. You knew everybody and everybody knew you. It was just that small. The Iowa was a lot bigger, so you could literally not see somebody for 3-4 days, and it's not an unknown thing. But the gallery, if you didn't see somebody like a day, you were wondering what the heck was going on. So.
What would you say, like, your best memory would be?
My best memory, I think it's, like I said, I think my first deployment going to see the pyramids was an amazing sight. They look like they're out in the middle of the desert, but when you stand next to them and you turn right around, the city's right behind you. So the movies make it look a little different than it actually is, but it was phenomenal.
What would you say your worst memory would be?
My worst memory was on April 19th, 1989, a little after 8 o'clock in the morning. I was aboard the USS Iowa, and we had a turret explosion that killed 47 of my fellow shipmates in the blink of an eye. And that definitely put a damper. So a very bad memory about that I still live with today.
That was in the Iowa, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
So, like, when were you, like, did you leave the military or were you discharged?
I did 9 years in the military. I did 2 enlistments, and at the end of my second enlistment, with the way that the budgets were, the drawbacks and all that, I had to make the decision of whether or not I stayed around for another basically another 11 years to get a 20-year retirement, or get out. And it was not an easy decision, but an easy decision. I had to think of my family and that, and their welfare and providing for them. So I decided to get out and come back up here to the Cape, and here I've been since 1996.
What was your last day like?
My last day was pretty easy. Before that, I had I had to check out of my command, go to different places and get things signed off and records removed and so on and so forth. So my last day was a little going away party from my fellow shipmates in Connecticut, and then went home, got my car, and drove up here to the Cape.
Were you, like, nervous when you first, like, enlisted, or, like, when you, like, were going to boot camp or starting?
A little bit, because I didn't. What people can tell you is going to happen doesn't necessarily happen to you. My one advantage is I went to boot camp with a friend of mine from high school, so the two of us were there together. But was it Yeah, it was nerve wracking because you didn't know what to expect. All of a sudden, you have somebody telling you how to walk, how to stand, how to talk, how to sit, how to tie your shoes, how to put on your socks. It's it was an interesting thing that is actually still carried over today. The way I tie my shoes is the way that they taught me how to tie my shoes in the military, not the way that my mom did.
Um, like how was like other than the sleeping hours and stuff, like what was like the hardest part about boot camp?
um, Boot camp, they're trying to train you. You have a lot of different things you have to learn. You have to learn military history, history of the Navy, ranking structures, firefighting, um, security. Gosh, a lot of things you have to learn. And it's a short period to teach you it in. And then after that, if in my case I was lucky enough to go off to school, but there were some other guys that they had to go out to the fleet with just basic knowledge, and you learn it out in the fleet what you want to do or what you're going to do. I had the advantage of I knew what I wanted to do, so when I graduated boot camp, they sent me to school to learn what I was going to do.
When you moved from the Iowa to the gallery, did anyone like move with you that you knew before?
Um, I actually had run into a friend of mine uh, that I went to school with. He was about 6 weeks ahead of me in school. Um, he went to the West Coast. I went to the stayed on the East Coast, and on our second ship, I finished school before him. Um, Reported to the ship, and then he came about 6 months after me, and we kind of looked at each other like, I know you. And after that, we just started saying where we were when we were there, and then it was like, I remember you from A school. And to this day, that was in 1987, so to this day, we've been friends. Uh, Talk to him all the time. He lives in Virginia with his wife and kids, and I live up here with mine.
Does any of the skills that you learned there influence you today?
Yes. Yep. They teach you a lot of the basics. My job now is I'm a heating system technician, a boiler technician. So the electronics part of it is what I learned in the military, and a lot of that carried over to my civilian job, we'll call it. Power, the way wires run, water runs, and all that. So it was definitely a good basis, and got me pointed in the right direction. I wasn't totally lost when I went to my current job 14 years ago.
If one of your daughters or someone came up to you and told you that they were gonna enlist, how would you respond?
As I usually have, like I try to tell them, make sure it is what you want to do. Make sure it's not what somebody's trying to tell you to do. Get the most out of it, which was told to me by my father, is whatever they're going to give you, you take. Any schooling, whatever training, anything they want to give you, you take. So it's a great idea to kind of know what you want to do, or if you can figure out what you want to do in life, we'll call it, that to try and get into that skill. The Navy, there's only, oh gosh, the last time I knew there was like 47 different ranks or jobs you could do. And so you kind of got specific to certain areas. I mean, there were electronics technicians that all they did is work on electronics. There were engine men that all you did is work on engines. Torpedo men worked on torpedoes. Sonar men worked on sonarmen, and so my job, I kind of blended a few of them together with weapon systems. So I had to know what the guys in the missile launcher were doing, or the guys in the guns were doing, so everything was interfacing and working together. So when I took the military entrance exam, which back then was called an ASVAB exam. I'm not sure what it's called now, but they let you know where your interest or where you'd probably best be suited at. So it's where you're suited at and what you want to do. So you have to make the decision, because it could be your job for 3 years, it could be your job for 20 years.
Can you go a little more in depth of like your part of the Navy, like what you did?
My job on the Iowa was I was in charge of the big guns, the big 16-inch guns. My field was, we told them where to shoot or where to point, where I pulled the trigger to make them go boom. So we were responsible for, like I said, the safety of the ship against attacks. But the big thing was, it was called NGFS, Naval Gunfire Support. The Marines or whoever on the ground calling in the middle of the night or whenever, because they're being overrun, we would shoot our big guns in, and we actually held the long distance shooting record of 27 and a half miles. We were able to shoot 5 16-inch projectiles that weighed about 2,700 pounds, so that's a little over a ton, 27 and a half miles, and land 5 out of 6 on a school bus. So we could be pretty accurate when we needed to be.
Was like all like being in charge of a lot of things, like was that like intimidating to you and when you first like started that, or?
You kind of start out at the bottom. You know, you don't know much. You kind of rely on the guys above you to tell you and keep you pointed in the right direction. But eventually you do move up through the ranks, and new people come in, and it's your responsibility to tell them, you know, this is how we do this, and this is why you have to do it, and explain why you have to do it. So if the person above you didn't explain to you right, and you're doing it all wrong, when the next people come on, you're just going to pass that wrongness right down to you. So at least I did, and like I said, a lot of my friends, we made sure we did it right, because you're training the people that are, something happens to you, they have to continue, and vice versa. You know, you have to make sure that you can do your job, and you also have to be able to do the other people's jobs around you.
How can you compare your feelings on your first day to your feelings on the last day?
Kind of both about the same. I would say the same. It's the excitement of not knowing what you're going to do when you go to boot camp, but it's also the excitement of not knowing what you're going to do when you get out of the military. I mean, if you didn't have something set right up, you're kind of in a panic of, okay, now what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And some people had the ability, they could go back into the military. Other people, like myself, we just did what we had to do to make a living. And I worked at a boatyard for 6 years after I got out of the Navy, and then I went into my current field.
How did this experience like impact your life?
Lots of respect. They always say to respect your elders, and this is why. I mean, I have a lot of friends that have done exactly what I've done, and a lot of friends that don't know what I've done, the things that I've seen, the places that I've been. So it goes on both ways. You can explain it to somebody, but to me, it always feels better when somebody has been there and done that. It's like, oh, do you remember when we went to the pyramids? Or do you remember when we went to Germany? Or when we went to Djibouti, Africa? Stuff like that. So, like I said, I've seen different parts of the world, and I've met people and that. So, I hope that answered that.
Did you have like a separate job in the gallery, or like a different one, or?
No, same job throughout. It was just, instead of doing a 16-inch gun, I did we had a smaller gun, and we also did a missile defense system. Our big job on the gallery was to protect the aircraft carrier, to stay between any enemy coming at it, any harm that would come its way. We were basically the first line of defense, whether it was to jump in front of that missile or run in front of that torpedo or shoot down that aircraft. That's what we were there to do. So that's what we did. It was this same fire control technician. It was just, instead of using big guns, I was using $1 million missiles.
Like, did you ever like come like not face to face, but like come like close to like the enemy or like whoever you were trying to like fight against?
Not. I would say not as much as some of my friends in the military.
Mm-hmm.
We were deployed, like I said, to the Persian Gulf and that. So there were interdictions that we did, stop ships, search ships, looking for weapons of mass destruction or illegal cargo or arms, anything that wasn't supposed to be transported. So there were some times where you got a little, we'll call it edgy, because that freighter didn't want to stop, so you'd have to start chasing it down or put a shot across its bow so they know you were serious. So, but was I like in the desert running around with an M16? No, I left that to, like I said, a couple of the guys in my high school class. I let them do that.
Oh, so you had like friends that went to different branches of the military?
My high school class, we had, we would have had somebody in every branch of the service, but at the last second, one decided to go from the Army to the Navy. So we had one guy in the Air Force, a couple guys joined the Marine Corps, and then my friend Michael and I joined the Navy. So.
What was like the most like frightening moment of the experience?
Again, the turret explosion, because where it had happened, it was basically a big powder keg, and if we didn't get the fire under control and the fire suppression didn't work, it literally could have blown the ship in half. So that was my most frightening experience, we'll call it, in the military.
If there's if there's anything you could like take back or redo, what would that be?
That date of April 19th, I don't wish that on anybody, because like I said, that morning at breakfast, everybody was laughing and joking and having a good time, and we were going to go shoot the big guns like we had done many times before, and one little thing happened, and 47 guys went home in body bags. So they were fathers, sons, and brothers, and that, and they just never got to see their family again.
Is there like any like reunions today or anything like that, or?
Yes, the USS Iowa was made into a museum, which is out in California now, and yearly there is reunions in various parts of the country with them, and just recently the gallery, I got onto Facebook, and lo and behold found a website with them and got in with them and found out they have yearly reunions in different parts of usually the South Coast, because a lot of the guys are from down there.
Have you been to any of them?
I have not yet. Not had the chance.
Like, do you have any artifacts or anything that you want to show, or?
Behind you, I have my boot camp picture, and I have a couple of patches from the ships. One of the ships I was on. This is my boot camp picture, and as you can see, all of us, I think the oldest, with the exception of one gentleman, a Filipino gentleman that was like 40 years old, all of us were between 18 and 20 years old. And then this is my second ship's crest is what it's called. The USS Gallery was named after an admiral in World War II that the Germans had tried to scuttle a submarine, and he saved it from being scuttled, which they discovered the Enigma machine, which was used to send codes and stuff like that. So with that machine, the U.S. was able to find out where submarines were going, and were able to more easily, we'll call it, defeat the Germans. This is my gallery, my second cruise to the Persian Gulf in '93, and this here is just when you are on your uniform, on your shoulders, it tells you what command you're attached to, and this was just off my last command, which was the submarine base in New London, Connecticut. I did have a bunch of medals and stuff like that, and I don't know where they're at. They're somewhere hidden in the house somewhere. So unfortunately, I can't find those. If I find them, I will let you use them for your presentation if you need be.
Well, thank you for having us today.
Thank you for...
And thank you for your service.
Thank you.